wellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
You're listening to A Quirky Journey, the healthy family podcast with your hosts Jo Whitten and Fouad Kassab.
Welcome to A Quirky Journey. This is Fouad Kassab, and with me is my good friend Jo Whitten. Hi, Jojo.
Hello, Fufu. How you doing?
How's it going?
Good.
I'm doing great, thank you. I'm sitting on my bed trying to organize my laptop. Today's topic is going to be about fats.
Yes.
Fats, cooking with fat, and what's going on with all that. There's a lot of questions all the time about what the best type of fat to cook with is, and how do we make decisions, and what does the science say, and all that kind of stuff. And recently, there has been an Australian study that came out on the 5th of May, 2018. So this is very, very recent. And it's been published in Acta Scientific. And that's volume 2, issue 6, June 2018. And it's titled The Evaluation of Chemical and Physical Changes in Different Commercial Oils During Heating. And that's a really, really cool study. Man, it came up with some nuggets of wisdom.
Sure did.
I love it. I love this study because it really came in line with the view of whole foods that Jo and I teach. And Jo, we've been talking about cooking oils for years now to people. And
we have, and we get questions constantly. And also at our seminars, we talk about fats in a fair bit of depth, fats and cholesterol and all of the, the past, how it's been told, all the things that we've been told about traditional fats being no good, and you need to change over to vegetable oils and margarine, and then now it's swinging back. And this study just really will help people to understand why it's important to eat traditional fats.
All right, so shall I dig into this?
Yes, go ahead. And I have lots of questions from readers, so you begin.
I'll set the scene a little bit so that we understand where we're coming from and why this kind of study is super important. So we had this period in our history as people where we were eating traditional fats. That's the only thing that were available to us, fats that we could make at home through very simple processes. Things like crushing olives or churning coconut or churning cream and turning that into coconut oil or butter. And then from the butter we made ghee. We also were making things like tallow and lard. Tallow is the fat from beef or lamb, and we had lard from pork, or we had chicken fat and duck fat. And these were the fats that were there, and we could make these animal fats just simply by cooking the animal, and then the fat would render naturally off it. And we would put these fats aside and use them in cooking later when we wanted to bake vegetables or like root vegetables or something. We'd add them to rice dishes or whatever. And this is both the vegetable-based fats like olive oil and coconut oil, and also the animal fats. But then we had the fat-phobic era where we were told that eating things like saturated fat were really, really bad for us. And we switched from eating those to eating a new type of fat. We didn't just simply drop eating butter and ghee and tallow and lard and switch to eating just olive oil and coconut oil. In fact, coconut oil was demonized because it was really high in saturated fat. And we also saw an emergence of a new type of oil, or a new family of oils called industrial seed oils. And these include things like sunflower oil, grapeseed oil, canola, rice oil, and peanut oil.
Rice bran.
Rice bran oil. And these oils are the oils manufactured by industry. What I mean by that is, if you get, say, rice bran, I give you a whole heap of rice bran. I say, hey, Jojo, go ahead and make me some rice bran oil.
I'd be a bit stuck.
Yeah, because if you see rice bran, it actually doesn't look oily at all. Whereas coconut is obviously oily. As you eat it, you notice that, hey, this is oily. And olives as well. All you need to do is to crush olives, and then the olive oil will come out. It is just an inherent part of the olive. And there are fats like from things like grapeseed and canola and rice bran, which require machines to extract them. Like we can't just simply put them through. I'll give you an example. Like olive oil now, the way that they create extra virgin olive oil is they crush it with a stone, it's a machine that churns the olives with a really large heavy stone and turns the stone around the olives and it crushes them, and then it goes through they add water to it. That water functions to keep it cool, and also as the oil then and the water travel through the circuitry, it goes through a process where it's sort of separated. The oil comes out one way and the water comes out the other way, and the word escapes me now, but it's a centrifuge. That's right. So as it churns through the centrifuge, it's basically the centrifuge allows the water and the oil to circulate at a high speed, and as it circulates at a high speed, the oil and the water then settle to different levels, and the oil can be skimmed off the water, and that way you just get pure oil out. Whereas things like canola and rice bran and sunflower oil, they're processed through intense heat and chemical processing. There's a process called hexane extraction, and it produces an oil that then needs to be further refined and deodorized, and sometimes the color needs to be taken out of it. And I've heard that the raw oil tastes quite foul as well, and it needs to have the flavor taken out of it. So you end up with a highly refined oil that required a lot of heat and machinery to extract it. And these types of oils are rich in a family of compounds called PUFAs, or polyunsaturated fatty acids. Polyunsaturated fatty acids are found naturally in things like, say, almond or tahini or sesame, but in those foods they are contained within a cellular structure, and they still sit within the whole food classification. But then when you take them out of a cellular structure and you put them under heat, and you chemically process this stuff, these oils start degrading, because these polyunsaturates, they're one of the most readily oxidizable fats that we have. They're very fragile. They will rust very, very easily unless they are in intact food form. And if they're treated with heat and they're exposed to oxygen with the heat and then filtered and gone through all that process, and then put in these plastic bottles and shipped around the country and kept in conditions where the light is hitting them on the shelf, because of the clear plastics that they're using, it continues this degradation process of the polyunsaturates and causes them to become oxidized, which means rusty. And that in itself will go into our body as we eat these things, and the body will make its cell membranes out of these fats, and these fats are already rusty, and as it does that, then the cell membranes are more fragile, and then we become more prone to chronic illness. That's what the science is showing is happening with these PUFAs. But we're not now in the time where the policy has caught up with the science. So food policy is still saying they're very good for us because they're not saturated fats, and science is showing that no, these things are actually not good for us. And the argument is that they have higher smoke points and things like that, which we'll dig into in a little bit. But what's really important to know about PUFAs as well is they're omega-6s. That's the word for it, and you may know the word omega-6, and as opposed to, say, omega-3s, which are the fats that we know to be extremely healthy, and they come from fish. So things like fish oil and eating fatty fish is really good. omega-3s are also found in pasture-fed eggs and in fats from animals that have been living on pasture. So cows and lambs that have been eating grass, they'll create a fat that contains a good amount of omega-3 in it. And when we've analyzed the diets of traditional people, we've seen that the ratio of omega-3s to omega-6s has been 1-to-1 or 1-to-3. So basically for every gram of omega-3, the traditional culture people have had in relationship, they've eaten 1 gram of omega-6 or up to 3 grams of omega-6. But now, because of the way that we're eating these industrial seed oils, we're eating them in excess of 20-to-1. So like 1 omega-3 up to 20 omega-6s. That's how much we've increased. So that's become really, really high. And I remember reading an article once about the introduction of these oils into Israel, and because they're so they work really well with kosher cooking in terms of the fact that they don't have a flavor, and they're not made of dairy or anything like that. So when it comes to kosher eating, it kind of makes sense to eat these types of fats. So Israel really embraced these types of fats, and then we started seeing an increase in heart disease that correlates to the increase of consumption of these fats. And this is a correlation. It's not a causation. We don't know if it's causing it, but like the evidence is showing that with the more they were eating of these omega-6s, the more that they were prone to heart disease. And so the science is coming out on all fronts, showing that these things are not good. But they're still being sold in supermarkets at the moment, and we're being told that, hey, these are the things that we should be having. And they even have things like the Heart Foundation take on them because they don't have saturated fat in them. And the question is this something that we should be continuing as a people in terms of producing and eating? And the reason why they are so widely available and so cheap is because of unsustainable farming methods that are subsidized by government. So we get these large fields where we deforest, or we used to have traditional farming, and then we clear that whole land and we start growing that one crop of canola, for instance, or sunflowers or peanut. And they start depleting the land, and over time that land can turn into deserts if we don't look after it well. Of course, these oils or these seeds and crops are being sprayed by pesticides in order to keep the pests at bay. The reason why we need to spray them with pesticides is because nature doesn't really allow for monoculture. There's no examples in nature where large expanses of fields grow just the one thing. Nature creates resilience through biodiversity. So we have a bunch of different plants that grow in the same area, and they're companions for each other. They attract different types of birds and insects, and they repel certain types of insects, and they defend each other, and it creates a very resilient and healthy environment. And that also looks after the soil. So it creates more biodiversity in the soil, different types of bacteria and worms and things like that. The humus is healthy, so the part of the soil that actually contains the roots, it can retain water when the water rains and creates a really healthy environment. When we cut all these things down, we just grow the one crop, and we also spraying things with herbicides and fungicides. We're killing the soil through the chemicals that we're adding there, and we're not creating resilience at all. So that means we need pesticides on the crops. So it's a big problem, because it's creating and deserts are actually being created because of this around the world, and we won't be able to grow monocultures for much longer. But through this capitalistic system that's really only interested in short-term profits, and they're not really interested in long-term sustainability, they can grow these things at the moment with such high yield that they can make a lot of money doing it.
And the argument is that we have to do it this way to support such a large population of the world, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's one argument, that the world will not survive without monoculture.
That's what I've heard.
Looking at established examples of monoculture is that after certain areas have been monocultured for a while, they turn into deserts. So there will be a collapse in that system. It won't be able to grow anymore. Yeah. That's right. So, we can refer back to that podcast we did with Joel Salatin around sustainable farming. Go back and have a listen to that one. It's an incredible podcast about the resilience that can be created through a proper farming system rather than doing these monocultures.
And how it can feed the world if it was done that way. Yeah.
Yeah, and the truth is we're not in any way sustainable when it comes to monocultures. Just won't feed the world for much longer. It might feed it for a while. But what are we feeding the world?
Exactly.
We're feeding the world these grains that are heavily polluted as well. And the pesticides and herbicides that are on the food are coming into our bodies and create a sick humanity. And so then we're not really looking at a big picture at all. We're just looking at profit and meeting demand. And the thing about it is it's actually created so much of these crops that the demand is not even there. So they have to turn them into another product, which is these oils. And then they have to market these oils to us to say that they're healthy so that we can actually buy them so we can consume and profits can increase. And it's a really scary world that we live in. And
sure
at the moment, we have people around the civilized world, so-called civilized world, who are firmly in the belief system that these guidelines that the governments give us, or the Heart Foundation gives us around these oils, with the tick that it gets given, is that this is the healthy stuff to be eating, and that we shouldn't be eating olive oil or cooking with it. We shouldn't be cooking with coconut oil or avocado oil, and we should be sticking to those oils that have the Heart Foundation take on them. And today's study, like today's podcast, which talks about the study, gets into this topic really in a very interesting way, because typically what people have spoken about before is smoke points and how smoke points affect cooking. So smoke point is the heat or the temperature at which the oil that you're cooking with starts burning. You can see smoke coming out of it. And that's a good indicator of damage that's occurring to the oil. So typically we're looking for oils that have a high smoke point in order to cook with them so that they don't degrade while we're cooking. But this study goes further and talks about another aspect, which is polar compounds and trans fat levels after cooking,
so interesting.
Or during cooking. And it is really interesting. So, do you have any questions so far, Jo?
Well, I do, but you're on a good roll, so I can do them at the end. Okay,
so I'll talk a little bit about this study. So what they have is they studied sunflower oil, grapeseed oil, canola, rice bran oil, peanut oil, coconut oil, extra virgin olive oil, and avocado oil. And look, this study was done in a place called Modern Olives Laboratory Services, Australia. So just from reading this article or this study, it's really worth mentioning this, because there could be a conflict of interest between the people who are studying this and the results itself, because the results were very favorable for extra virgin olive oil. They basically said that extra virgin olive oil, I'll sort of give you the results, that extra virgin olive oil did really, really well as opposed to the other stuff. So this conflict of interest we need to talk about it, that this kind of study is done by a company which, by the name of them, it sounds like they are invested in promoting olives, or because they're called Modern Olives Laboratory. Does that mean that the science is flawed or wrong? Unless they've committed fraud, I guess, in the results. Probably not. And it's really worth seeing if someone repeats the study and gets the same results, and they have no interest or no vested interest in olive oil or promoting that. So I'm hoping that more studies will come out. But this is it's a good study to look at, because the science looks sound from where I'm standing, just looking at what they did. And so I'll talk a little bit about what they found.
It's such a detailed study. It's not slapdash at all. And it's quite difficult for probably most people to read through. I got probably, a fair way through it, and then I was like, wow, this is quite detailed. So obviously we'll put the link in the show notes so people can go through it while you're talking. But if you could work through it and explain what it's talking about, that would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, I'm not a scientist either. I'm just looking at the things that I've been able to understand myself.
Yeah.
They do have some parts which are really, really clear, and some of the science I do understand. So I'll talk about the science that I do understand, but it would be really cool to get someone who is a scientist who can walk us through what has been found through this study. But at the end of it, it's really important to know that they do have a conclusion there, which really is, you can just understand without being a scientist.
That's right,
So I'll talk a little bit about the part that says polar compounds. And basically, these are new compounds that are formed in the oil when you expose the oil to heat. So these are, if you have an oil and it's stable at room temperature, and then you start heating it up, it starts creating new compounds because of the heat. The heat creates chemical reactions within the oil, and it creates new compounds. And some compounds are healthy, and some compounds are not healthy. So, not that some are healthy, some are not healthy. We know that some of them aren't healthy for us. We don't know which ones are healthy and which ones are not, but we know that some are not healthy for us. So, there's a part of the study that says some and not all of these polar components are known to have a detrimental effect on human health, as they have been consistently associated with various forms of cancer and neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. Right? So this is the part about polar compounds. And what they did is they took these oils and they heated them to 180 degrees, and they left them. And they started measuring them at different intervals of time.
Left them cooking at 180 for a few hours.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
which is what would happen in a
deep fryer.
In a cafe or something. Yeah.
That's right. Like we'll keep it at that temperature for a long period of time, because they need to be ready when the service comes along. They're just going to fry.
Yeah.
So what they saw was this is the result. These are the ones that were the worst performance, from worst to from that order. Like the worst was sunflower oil, followed by grapeseed oil, followed by canola and rice bran, and then peanut. These were the worst. And then the ones that looked really similar and were on the lower end of the spectrum in this order were from best to less, good, but not bad, like they're considered within the safe range. We have coconut oil, and then extra virgin olive oil, normal olive oil, which is not extra virgin, and avocado oil. So from this, we see that coconut oil seems to be the most stable when
in long periods
of time. There's a point to talk about that a little bit later, but this is what they saw, that coconut is actually most stable there.
Okay.
And in the study says this. It says, in general, oils that are more unsaturated oxidize more readily than less unsaturated. So the more unsaturated are the PUFAs, the polyunsaturated fatty acids. PUFAs means that they have a lot of parts of those molecules that are ready to take on reactive oxygen species, or things that bind to them that are not part of them. So these are you've heard the term antioxidant. When our body has these parts of it that are ready to oxidize, if we take antioxidants, these molecules of antioxidants go and sit within that molecular structure, and they fill it up so that they repel any negative molecules or bad molecules that might come and sit in that place. So they're healthful molecules to sit in our body in those molecules. It's hard to explain. Maybe I said that I could explain this a little bit better. So imagine that we have a molecular structure in our body, in our cell membrane, that can attract good things or bad things. And if we have food that is high in antioxidants, that's the good things. And the good things will come and bind and keep that cell really safe, because those things aren't bad for us. The less available molecules that need this kind of antioxidant in our body, the better off we are. So if our body is made of fats that are saturated already, or it's made of fats that are monounsaturated, which means they just have one available bond for these reactions, then our need for antioxidants goes down. And then that means we don't rust as quickly. But as we're eating more polyunsaturated fatty acids, we require more antioxidants in our diet. But if they arrive already damaged and they're already oxidized, then no amount of antioxidants will do the trick anyway. And they're saying here that the more unsaturated the fat is, which is the ones that are like the sunflower, the grapeseed, the canola,
which we've been told are the ones we're supposed to be eating.
Yes, the study is saying that in general, oils that are more unsaturated oxidize more readily than unsaturated. So they're rusting more readily when exposed to heat. And that means that, when we eat them, they already have that damage.
And have you mentioned about the way that our cell membrane is made up of the fats that we eat?
I have, yes, I mentioned that before.
I missed that, sorry.
No, that's all right. So that's a super interesting thing to note. And we knew this already, but the science is showing it now.
Yes.
And then they have this long paragraph, which I'll read to you, and then we can talk about it afterwards. This is about trans fats. And they did 240 degrees and 180 degrees. So this is what it says. It says trans fats, which we know are unhealthy fats. They're the type of fat that the oil becomes after heating. Some of the oils start deteriorating into trans fats, and then when we eat these trans fats, they're really bad for us. And there's a level of trans fats where it's completely unacceptable to have in our food, and there are many parts of the world where they have regulations around trans fats, where they say you're not allowed to have trans fats go over a certain amount. Now, trans fats, from the study, trans fats levels of initial conditions after reaching 240 degrees centigrade and after 6 hours of heating at 180 degrees are shown in figure 1. Celsius. There's a remarkable difference between initial trans fat content in refined oils and non-refined oils. Grapeseed showed the highest amount of initial trans fat content, while extra virgin olive oil and virgin olive oil showed the lowest. These results are consistent with the oil production method, as refined oils are bleached and heated during the industrial process, and virgin oils such as Evo and VOO and avocado, only produced with mechanical processes. as opposed to, this is an aside, as opposed to refinement and bleaching and heating. Maintain a naturally lower level of trans fats. And now it says figures 4 and 5 show the evolution of K232 and K270, which is these are codes for trans fats. As expected, both of the indices of K232 and K270 increased during the heating experiment. This increase indicates the formation of conjugated dienes or peroxides and a whole bunch of different, I won't read the chemical name of these things, over time. So like the more we heated, the more of these things got produced, basically.
Yep.
The initial and final values of K232 and K270 for grapeseed, sunflower, and rice bran oil were higher than the rest of the oils tested. For most of the oils, the production of trans fat were more pronounced by temperature than prolonged time of heat exposure. So the temperature, basically what that means is these oils, if you just got them to a certain temperature, it'll just start producing trans fats.
Yeah.
And then it says from there, the natural oils such as EVO, VOO, and avocado oil were more affected to elevated temperature, while refined oils were more affected by the time of heat exposure at 180 C.
Okay.
Except for canola oil, that was also affected by temperature.
Yeah.
So what that means is if we got these oils and we put them for several hours at 180 degrees, the refined oils were producing much more trans fats than the healthy natural ones.
Yeah.
And the healthier fats would produce trans fats if they got really hot, like up to 240, they'd start producing trans fats at a significant rate. So it is a call to not overheat anything.
Yeah.
But those prolonged temperature cooking is showing a lot of trans fat production in the seed oils, and it starts from an early time. And if you look at the graph, it is scary how much more. Like the graph for trans fats.
Yeah, the one with the grapeseed oil shocked me.
Yes.
Because so many people use grapeseed oil thinking it's a safe oil, and we've been telling people for ages, no, it's very refined. And then you really see it with the trans fat.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's terrible when you see, like, figure Shocking. 1 is the trans fats, and you just go, wow, like extra virgin olive oil, olive oil, avocado, coconut. They did brilliantly. They were so stable compared to the others. And then the other ones started off with more trans fats already because they'd already been heated during manufacturing. Yeah. And then they shot up like crazy.
Really crazily.
So there's that aspect too. And we also there's also a part of the study which talks about actually, hold on. Let me see if there's something to talk about here before I move on to the last bit.
Okay.
Yes. So, just to reiterate, basically the industrial seed oils deteriorated simply by prolonged exposure to heat. And we're not talking about high heat cooking here. Like, this is 180 degrees. But the longer you kept them hot, the more trans fats started elevating in them. Yeah. The natural fats deteriorated less over time, but increasing the heat does increase the deterioration. And canola oil was affected both by temperature and time.
Yeah. So either way, just don't eat it.
Don't eat it. And, the conclusion from that is to cook with natural fats to avoid trans fats, and cook on lower temperature, low and slow. And things like, using them in a stew, which, like, I don't know if people worry too much about it, but when I make a stew or a soup and I want to fry, say, my vegetables,
saute it before you
saute them, the amount of time and the heat is quite minimal. You don't spend a lot of time sauteing stuff, and then when you add the water, as it starts boiling, that keeps it at 100 degrees. So it doesn't actually go even up to 180. And and there are, we're seeing that we don't create trans fats in, say, olive oil during that period of time.
One thing,
nothing significant.
One thing we talk about with frying, especially if you're using, like we use the solid Technics pans and you've got that hot iron, you've got to keep the heat lower anyway to, so things don't stick, because you've got that natural non-stick. And I think it's fine to use plenty of good fats when you're cooking and frying, and just keep the heat. Don't turn the heat all the way up. Just keep it a little bit lower, and you're getting good results both for your pan and for your food that way. I just thought I'd mention that, a practical point.
Yeah. So, look, I'll read the conclusion from the study. There's more information there that I couldn't even understand.
Well, have you mentioned much about smoke points? Because that's the thing. Most people say, yeah, but the smoke point. Yeah, but the smoke point. So it's only part of the... Like, as Fouad said, there's so much more to it than just the smoke point.
Yeah, and they do talk about that. They talk about smoke point as well. And again, we shouldn't be cooking anything too hot. Like, it shouldn't.
If it is smoking away, then it's too hot.
Yeah, I mean the reason why, say, canola has a high smoke point is because it's so refined that there's kind of nothing to really burn, but its oxidative stability is low.
Yes.
So it oxidizes more, and it creates a lot more polar compounds. So, and it also has more polyunsaturated fatty acids. So what they're saying in the study here is smoke point can't be the only factor to take in.
Yes.
So they're looking at final polar compounds, oxidative stability, as well as smoke point, free fatty acids, and the percentage of polyunsaturated fatty acids, and the amount of trans fats in these oils after cooking.
Yeah.
And when you look at all these factors together, it just becomes very clear to see that you should be just using natural oils. Like, there's no,
you can't argue
argument
against
around
it.
No.
Yeah.
But this is the conclusion that they came up with. They said, from the study, it can be concluded that under different heating conditions, the generation of polar compounds with temperature and time was more pronounced for refined seed oils with higher initial values of smoke points, PUFAs, K232 and K270. It is important to note, so basically, like, the polar compounds were higher correlating to the smoke point. So, like, seeing that the higher smoke point in those things had a correlation with an increase of polar compounds.
Yeah.
So I'll continue. It is important to note that the experiments were carried out without food being cooked. So they're saying this is just oil. They're just heating the oil. And that they also say that while cooking, the water and steam which comes from the food being cooked aids the process of hydrolysis, and the absence of food in these trials may have allowed for a greater impact of oil oxidation when compared with other deterioration reactions. So they're saying this is not representing what it would look like in a kitchen when you're actually cooking something, but that's not what they're trying to look at here in the study. The reasonable predictors of how an oil will perform when heated have been oxidative stability, secondary products of oxidation, and total level of PUFAs. EVO, or extra virgin olive oil, has demonstrated to be the most stable oil when heated, followed closely by coconut oil and other virgin oils such as avocado and high oleic acid seed oils. So this is why I talk about high oleic organic cold pressed sunflower oil, because it's a machine. It's not extracted through chemical processes and heat and things like that. It's just a cold pressed. Yeah. So, but they didn't study that. They didn't study high oleic sunflower. The peanut that they used was high oleic, and the high oleic peanut did better than all the other seed oils. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what's interesting about it, but it's not something, and they call it something like softly processed or something like that.
Okay.
The peanut oil. But what high oleic means is that it has it's got less polyunsaturated fatty acids and more monounsaturated. So it's the closer its fatty acid profile is to olive oil, the healthier it seems to be. Yeah.
Okay, you ready for questions?
I hope so. I don't know if I can answer all the questions, but we'll see how it goes. I'm not going to answer questions that I don't
no,
know
of course. We'll just say we'll find out. But so the conclusion that I'm coming to, I'm, thinking of the practicalities of all this. Do you remember in a podcast a little while back, I can't remember who it was, maybe it was the gluten guy? No, I can't remember who it was, talked about how they used to fry chips in lard. Who was that talking about that? Anyway.
I don't remember either. Yes.
Yeah, but like 50 years ago or 60 or however many years ago it was McDonald's chips were fried in lard. People used lard in cafes and restaurants. And that could be, especially from this study, you can see that the more saturated the fats are, they would have coped well with that long heating process. But nowadays, I don't think you could go into pretty much any cafe or restaurant where they're going to have things like chips and anything fried that isn't going to be using vegetable oils or seed oils. Do you, when I know with your restaurant, well, you didn't do deep frying probably, but you always used...
I did.
Oh, did you?
I did.
But you used coconut
extra
oil.
virgin coconut, yeah.
Yeah. So, but I don't think many cafes and restaurants would be doing that because of the expense, right?
Yeah, well, it was very expensive because this was like organic extra virgin olive oil.
Which is why we loved your restaurant, and everyone's going to be saying, open it back up, Fouad. But it's something that we've actually been contacted before by people with cafes, and they've said, how do you do it? Because, what do you do? It's a difficult one.
Yes. Well, that's the thing, like having a supply of lard now that is coming from healthy pasture-fed animals is going to be quite difficult as well.
And then it's usually got preservatives if it's like a store-bought lard.
Yes.
So you pretty much don't want to buy fried food when you're out unless you go to Fouad's restaurant, which is now shut. Sorry.
And the interesting thing is to know that animals that are eating a grain-based diet will create more polyunsaturated fatty acids as well. Those omega-6s that this study is showing isn't that great for you because they're damaged already. Yeah. So you want to, if you're using tallow or lard to fry, it has to be from a very healthy animal. And at the same time, I really hesitate taking these fats up to anything over 180 degrees myself.
They say a frying pan very often gets up to 210 when you're frying in a frying pan at home.
Yeah.
Try and keep it low. Don't get the blackened bits and the smoke happening.
You don't want to damage those fats.
They're delicate.
Super important for the body. And a gentler way of cooking is definitely the way to go. Now, that said, we've cooked meat over fire, and we've done that for thousands of years, and
eaten plenty of antioxidants in our veggies and fruit.
Yeah,
so that's probably helped.
Yeah, a whole food diet with it's super important to know that the food's coming from a good place, and I don't worry too much about, say, barbecue or...
No, it's not every day, is it?
Sauteing. No, but if it's come from a healthy animal, I'm eating, leafy greens and bitters and things like that, and I feel okay about it.
Yeah.
But,
it's that balance. So, how you mentioned about adding water or food to the oils makes a difference. Does it make a difference? Do you know what difference that is? Does it make it a higher...
Sure. No, well, when you have water in a pot...
Reduces the temp?
It doesn't... The temperature can't go over 100 degrees.
Right.
This is the boiling temperature of water.
Yes.
And until the water actually evaporates completely, the oil cannot literally, physically get heated over 100 degrees because the whole soup is going to be at that temperature. It just can't go over it.
Well, I know when you've got oil or ghee or something heating in the pan and you forget because you're rushing around doing a zillion things in the kitchen, and then you come back and go, I haven't put the food in yet, and it's starting to smoke. Like if you have the food in there, it keeps it at a lower temperature, doesn't it?
That's right, and especially if you have water, like if you have
food
a
or
pot of
water.
boiling water and you put your oil on top,
Yeah.
the water will be boiling and evaporating at 100 degrees, stable at that temperature, and then as it until it evaporates, the oil won't go to 180. Just
okay, because I just wondered what you meant with the study. How how it said in the conclusion that was without food. So with food or water content in the cooking oil, it'll actually lower the temperature a bit.
Well, what they're saying is they haven't measured as well. Like when you have hydrolysis, which is another set of chemical reactions that can take place. You're adding more variables into the cooking process. So then we don't know what kind of trans fats are going to be created. Like, will it increase the trans fat creation in a specific family of oils?
Okay.
If you have hydrolysis,
right?
We don't really know that.
Okay.
So that's what they're trying to say is that it's a controlled study in just looking at what happens when oils are heated. Yeah. But it doesn't really represent what goes on in real life because we haven't, fried that schnitzel in there, or to see what happens to the oil when there's extra molecular compounds in there that may contribute to further chemical reactions in the oil.
Okay. We had a lot of questions on Facebook when we shared this study, and some of them were, what about macadamia oil? What about lard? What about tallow? What about ghee? And I think we just have to go back to the principle that this study is showing that the higher saturated fats do better at long cooking.
Well, it doesn't show that because it only showed coconut oil. That's the only saturated fat.
Oh, I see. I see. It only had that.
Yeah, and so we can't make any conclusions about anything really. Like,
okay, you wouldn't say that coconut oil, tallow, ghee, lard should be similar.
I would think that, but to infer that from this study is not something I can actually do.
And what would you say about macadamia oil? You just don't know either.
Well, my thing with macadamia oil is I really don't know how it's made. I've never been to a
cold
place.
Pressed.
Yeah, but like at the same time, like it seems to me like macadamias are $40 a kilo, right? Like for me to buy them from the shops, $40 a kilo. And when I buy macadamias from the shop, quite often I'll have like that flavor where I go, well, this one of them or a few of them doesn't taste that new to me, and I wonder whether they mix old macadamias in with new macadamias in the last year's macadamias get mixed with this year's macadamia, and then they get sort of diluted in the production line, and we end up eating, like, I don't know. And then from there, like if they're turning it into oil, when it's such a high value food product, why are they turning it into oil when they can make such a good amount of money from it just by selling it? Yeah. So and
probably because people want it. I see what you mean, though.
Maybe people want it. I don't know. I don't really know. Yeah, sure. But then, like, it's not a particularly expensive oil when you look at it that way. So it's sort of a little bit... it's not cheap compared to canola. Definitely not. But it's not a prohibitively expensive oil to use. And I'm just wondering, I would love to know, is it fresh nuts? How old are they? When were they picked? True. How soon after they got picked were they pressed? Like olives, you can't mess with it. Yeah. Like you get an olive, you have to press it.
Yeah, that's right. It rots otherwise.
Yeah. So that's my feeling around the olive thing. But when you got nuts and seeds, you can like avocados, you gotta press them. Yeah. You gotta get the oil out.
Okay. What about after? A few questions about olive oil. So what's the difference between extra virgin, all the different ones? And a lot of people say, well, I don't ever use extra virgin for frying or cooking because it's better to use the other ones. But this study doesn't seem to agree with that for sure. Can you just explain the difference? Like, do the lighter olive oils have anything added that we shouldn't be have like vegetable oils added to them, or are they just...
Yeah, okay. So definitely there are olive oils on the market that say, olive oil on them. They don't say extra virgin. And then when you look at them, you see that they've been blended with something else.
Yes.
So they'll have, I don't know, canola or sunflower or something in there, makes it lighter in flavor. But there are some good manufacturers that have certain types of olives that
taste lighter,
not as strong.
Okay.
So then it's not, they may call it light. They'll give you an indicator of lightness of flavor.
Yes.
Like this is a strong flavor or this is not a strong flavor. Now, extra virgin cold pressed, this is what you're looking for, is extra virgin cold pressed organic olive oil that's been harvested within the past 12 months or so and pressed. That's the kind of oil that you really want. That one is, what's good about that is it means that the acidity level is controlled, that it's not overly acidic and or under a certain acid. I don't remember exactly, but there's like a really specific number. I don't remember what it is for the acidity, and that means that the olives need to have been picked at a certain time, and that it gives you a certain flavor profile and a chemical profile as well. Cold pressed means that it hasn't been exposed to heat during processing.
Someone mentioned that she recently visited the Cobram estate.
Cobram?
And watched the harvest, and she said the different oils are for them, the different oils are simply different types of olives. But she said don't trust the European brands because they often refine and heat treat due to dodgy harvesting.
That's right.
So there was a bit of a blow up about olive oil a while back, wasn't there, a couple of years ago? The labelling being a bit dodgy.
Yeah. And you can buy extra virgin Australian olive oil and sort of trust that it is that because we have really stringent regulations.
Yes.
But at the same time, I feel it's really important to look at the manufacturing date because sometimes they have something that's quite old on the shelves as well. So make sure that it's the recent harvest as well.
Yeah. And so I'm just trying to make sure that everyone understands with the olive oils, you get a better smoke point with extra virgin?
It seems so.
And better for long term.
It looks like it's a higher smoke point,
Yeah.
So for me, it's always
extra virgin.
just
Same.
extra virgin. Never.
Yeah. And you get used to the taste. Like, I think people are so used to vegetable oils that when they swap over to olive oil, they're like, oh, tastes a bit funny. But you will get used to the tast.
Yeah, absolutely. It's delicious.
And then you start to go, wow, this is delicious. It's kind of peppery. And the one that your family makes is amazing. It's got that peppery taste.
Yeah, I've got a few of those left, Joe. Do you have anyone to buy them from?
Me.
Really? I've got like 4. If I send them up to far north Queensland, would you sell them for me?
Sure.
Okay,
I definitely need some. I ran out,
Good.
I go through a litre every few days sometimes. I don't know where it's going.
Yeah, well, I've got some here.
I must be bathing in it like you.
Yeah, it's good for you. No, I go through it a lot as well. I've got a heap I'm trying to. Yeah. Anyway, I'm not gonna talk about this here. I'll talk about it offline.
Okay. I'll see if I've got any more questions here. All right. Oh, there's a giant big heap of questions here. Okay, wow. So ghee we talked about on Facebook. I think we did talk about that a minute ago.
We said that we mentioned that ghee is
had a lot of
traditional fat.
Yeah.
And this study doesn't actually talk about any kind of animal fat at all. Haven't looked at them in any way. And our view is this is the beauty of what Joe and I teach. Is we look at through the ancestral lens. So we really love the work of Weston A. Price and this kind of idea that if we stuck to tradition, then we should be all right. And it's the simplest idea when it comes to eating.
Simplifies things so much.
It really does. And it means that, we don't actually have to wait for these studies that come out and say, and it seems that after we've done all this heating, testing at 240 degrees, 180 degrees, looking at trans fats and blah, 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 Dr. Weston A. Price was right.
Yeah.
And,
and our great-great-grandparents were actually eating the right ones.
Eating the right things, and it's like, sure, thanks for spending all that money on,
But the crazy thing is they kind of have to, because
they have to. Yeah,
society is so confused with it all now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Did you want to say anything about cholesterol? Because I'm sure some people still haven't quite got their head around that, or is that like a whole different topic?
It is a different topic. I mean, the
and we have talked about
cholesterol is the saturated fat aspect, and people worry about it clogging up their arteries, which it does. But have we done a podcast on cholesterol?
I think in the one where you talk about fats and your journey through healing, you did talk about it a little bit, but I can't remember how much. It was a little while ago.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Well, I don't know. We don't worry about saturated fats personally because they fall into the whole food, traditional food section there, and the science is showing that cholesterol now is really, there's no such thing as good cholesterol, bad cholesterol. It doesn't have split personality. One of it's trying to kill you, one of it's trying to do you good. But that cholesterol is produced in the body in response to inflammation, and that cholesterol is not the real killer, that the killer is inflammation, and that you have to be on an anti-inflammatory whole food diet that is suitable for your body and your biology, and gives you nutrition and nourishment, heals your gut. And when you're eating in that way, your body's need to produce cholesterol will be reduced, and then you don't have to worry about these things. That's sort of the perspective that we take. And when you eat animal products, if you're eating them from good sources, and you're cooking them in the right fats, and you're not adding inflammatory compounds such as gluten and sugar into your diet, and you don't have those terrible oils that we were talking about in this podcast in there, then your body's inflammation will reduce.
Yeah.
And when it does that, then having saturated fat from animals that are healthy in your diet is actually good for you. It's not bad for you. But the idea is to remove the refined ingredients and stick to a whole food diet, and your body will be naturally anti-inflammatory.
Yeah. That's good. So did you mention how the inflammation happens with the vegetable oils?
Yeah, it's a topic much wider than even I understand.
But we did have, I'll put some links to some of the podcasts where this stuff's covered in more detail, because I know that we'll get questions, but there was a really good podcast with Dr. Igor about inflammation. I don't remember if he talked about vegetable oils though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These trans fats, the oxidative stress that they add on the body because they're already oxidized, that in itself creates inflammation. I don't know whether there's other pathways of inflammation as well.
But we just know that's what happens.
Yeah, but if you just imagine at a cellular level that you're making your cell membranes out of these really damaged fats, and your cell is already fragile, and it's gonna die prematurely. So it's racing against time, whereas you want the best kind of stuff to build in your cells. You don't want to be building it from these already bad ingredients. You just want to get the best stuff into you.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I think that's all the questions I had. That wasn't too bad.
That's all right. Yeah. I hope this was a good podcast.
I think
it's kind of a hard topic to talk about when you're not a scientist. Like my science understanding is like first year university kind of level. So I hope that made sense.
Well, the whole thing is just, I think most of us don't understand a lot of the details of that study. Most people would look at it and go, I understand the basics, but and we just need to know what's the principle behind what they've figured out, and what do I do in my own home? What should I do with fats? And
yes.
I think we've covered that pretty well. I hope that's helped.
Whole food natural fats that are not made through industrial processes, that are heat treated or chemically treated, and that means avoid things like sunflower oil that's not high oleic organic, cold pressed. Avoid rice bran, canola, peanut, and what's the other one?
Grapeseed?
Grapeseed.
Yeah.
Yeah, grapeseed. Yeah.
Definitely.
And then stick to the olive oil, coconut oil. Use avocado oil. I mean, you can't buy avocado oil in large quantities to cook with anyway. Like, it's not, unless you're sauteing. But like, you're not gonna deep fry an avocado.
No.
Yeah. So, and deep frying really isn't the best way to eat anyway.
It's not something that we want to be doing all the time. And I think my takeaway is don't get takeaway. Do you like that?
Good. I love it.
It just popped out. I didn't even think it up before.
Oh, genius.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm learning from you, all the puns.
Yeah.
The dad jokes.
Good job, Jojo.
Thanks.
I'm proud of you.
All right. Well, I hope that was helpful, guys. And we'll put some helpful links in the show notes as well. So have a look there if you want to do a little bit extra study. And we'll be back in another week with some more podcasts for you.
Fantastic. Bye, guys.
Bye.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/The Wellness Couch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.